Hey, my friend. Welcome back to another episode of the Soul Podcasting Podcast, where passion, purpose, and podcast strategy come together to help you amplify your voice without the burnout. Now, whether this is your very first time here or you've been listening for a while, I want to say thank you. Really, I want to thank you for carving out this time to invest in yourself and your podcast journey. Your attention is valuable, and I don't take it lightly. I'm your host, Demetria, and I've been a podcaster for over 21 years, coaching podcast clients since 2006. I've founded multiple podcast shows, but my main focus now is helping solopreneurs and purpose-driven creatives use podcasting to amplify their voice, build authority, and grow their brand without overwhelm. At Soul Podcasting, we prioritize actionable coaching, proven growth strategies, and a strong focus on clarity, consistency, discoverability, and connection. So whether you're just starting out or you're looking to scale, my goal is to help equip you with the tools, the mindset, and the systems to make your podcast a sustainable business asset that fuels your impact, your influence, and of course, your revenue. So before we dive in, just a quick note, if you enjoy this episode and you want to connect with me visually, check out my YouTube channel, and I share over there some behind the scenes insights, some extended teaching and extra content that complements this podcast, I think. So you're going to find the link in the show notes if you should choose to go check it out, and I hope you do. Now let's dive into today's topic, which is the myth of just press record. I know I say it often on the show. I just encourage would-be podcasters to go ahead and press the record button and just get going. But I want this episode to set the tone for how we actually approach podcasting in 2026 and beyond, not just on this show, but for your own podcast too. Because the truth is that hitting record is only the beginning of the process. In fact, pressing record without clarity and strategy and intention is one of the most common reasons that podcasts fizzle out really early. The phrase just press record has been everywhere for years, and I'm guilty of it. I say it a lot on the show, but it was meant to be encouraging, to stop overthinking, to stop waiting for perfect equipment, perfect timing, or perfect confidence. On the surface, it does sound liberating, and in many ways, it was necessary, and sometimes it still is. We live in a world where people overanalyze every single move, especially creators who are trying to be perfect right out the gate. But the reality is, just press record, I think, is a myth. Because pressing record alone doesn't build momentum. It doesn't build audience or authority. It's a starting point and not a strategy. Industry data backs this up because nearly half of all podcasts never make it past their first 3 episodes, and only a small fraction ever reach 50 episodes or beyond. And that's taken from Podcasting Tech. So I'll leave a link to that statistic if you want to check that out. And this is not because people can't hit a record button. It's because they're missing the direction, the focus, and the mindset that supports sustainability. I've seen this firsthand because early in my coaching days, I worked with a new podcaster who followed the just press record advice religiously. She was enthusiastic, she had great ideas and a lot of energy, but without planning, every episode was just all over the place. It was scattered, and within just a few months, she felt defeated and burned out. It wasn't her fault. It was the system that she was following, and the intention just wasn't there. And so it's my job, I believe, as a podcast coach today, to help podcasters to not just launch a show and just press record, but to really think through the strategy of what that means. So that's why this episode is about going beyond the record button and reframing how we think about podcasting as a practice rather than a project. So podcasting is not a one-off project. I believe it's a practice. It's something you build over time like a muscle. And like any muscle, it needs consistent, intentional work to grow. Practice is about rhythm and not perfection, right? So it's about creating a sustainable pattern that respects your life, your energy, and your audience. This year, for example, I've structured Soul Podcasting intentionally. Most weeks, you're going to hear from me about twice, with one video layered in between. And some weeks it's going to drop only once. And that's not inconsistency. I think it's intentional alignment. It models exactly what I teach, which is create from clarity and not from pressure. This is a practice that you can sustain without burning out. So to make this actionable for you, you'll want to ask yourself, what rhythm can I sustain this year that honors both my life and my podcast? Write that down because it's one of the first steps toward creating a podcast that lasts. If you want to go beyond just pressing record, there are 3 mindset shifts that can transform your podcasting journey. So we're going to get into what those mindset shifts are. So podcasting is not just about the technicalities and getting into, how to edit your audio or what to talk about, but we want to start with your mindset. The first shift that you'll want to make is your motivation. It comes and it goes. And then how does that motivation lead to intention? Because intention is rooted. When your podcast is built on intention, every single episode has direction. So instead of asking, what should I record today? You're going to ask yourself, who am I here to serve and what do they need right now? So a little exercise to help you out with this is think about your ideal listener. As a solopreneur, entrepreneur, you probably have an idea of your ideal client. You might have created an ideal client profile at some point. So you're going to do the same thing for your podcast and think about your ideal listener. You're going to name that person, picture them, write a short note about what they're struggling with that week. That note that you write to yourself is going to help to guide your episode before you even touch the record button. And that's what moves podcasts from random output to meaningful impact. So that is motivation to intention. Now we want to look at your second shift, which is consistency, guilt, and sustainable rhythm. All right, we've talked about consistency, but I just have to say that when we're not consistent, we oftentimes feel guilty because we weren't. So we want to have sustainable rhythm as opposed to guilt over not being consistent. Let's talk about that for a minute. So many podcasters just quit because they believe they failed because why? They missed a week. They changed direction. They lost momentum along the way. But consistency is not about being perfect, my friend. It's about presence. Are you present for your audience? Even those small, reliable episodes create trust and authority. Here's another personal story. One client of mine years ago struggled to post every single week because of her life demands. And that's just normal, right? I mean, we get busy. We have other jobs, other things to do in life. So she shifted to posting twice a month intentionally, and she communicated her schedule to her listeners. And within months, her engagement was even stronger than ever because she was showing up consistently, but within her capacity. So it's better to under-promise and over-deliver than the other way around. Your audience will understand and they will forgive you. And in fact, they may even admire your willingness to just be honest and to do what you can do within your capacity. So we want to get rid of all of this consistency guilt. And when I speak, teach, and preach consistency, I hope that I'm not encouraging some sense of guilt because it is not my intention that anyone feel that way. In fact, I believe that consistency within your capacity is the best way to live your life. And so no matter what it is, whether it's podcasting, whether it is creating a new routine that you want to fit into your workflow every day, maybe it's a routine for your personal life, maybe it's your health, maybe it's getting up every morning at 5:30 a.m. If you're consistent 3 days out of the week, but you can't for the other 2 days, why not just celebrate the 3 days you were able to get up at 5 a.m. and keep working on those other 2 days if that's your final goal. If your goal was to cut sugar and you cut sugar for 6 days out of the week, but 1 day out of the week you had a brownie, so why not celebrate the 6 days that you cut your sugar intake and know that that 1 day a week you had that brownie doesn't offset you for the entire rest of your program. So it's, for me, all about how you look at consistency. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to work for you, and you need to celebrate where you are today. The third shift I want to share with you is the idea of am I good enough versus am I clear enough? So I believe that confidence grows from clarity. When you know exactly what your podcast is about, who it's for, and why it even exists, recording becomes so much easier. Listeners respond to clarity far more than they do polish. Research shows that listener retention matters more than raw reach. So most podcast growth will happen because people come back, not because they stumble on a single episode. And this is according to SQ Magazine. You want to ask yourself, does your episode have a clear problem that it's solving? A takeaway that your listener can walk away with? This small clarity check is often more impactful than a week of agonizing over your script. So just getting clear as opposed to being good enough. Preparation isn't procrastination. You want to prepare. And that's important before you press record. It's respect for your voice and your audience. Before recording, I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. The first is, who is this episode for? Okay, that who could be a lot of things, depending on what kind of podcast you want to share. But that who could also change depending on where you are in your entrepreneurial journey. And you may have discovered some new things recently that you didn't know a year or 2 ago about who you want to serve. So really get clear this year in 2026 about who your podcast is for, who your services and products are for. And that is going to help you get very strategic for the upcoming year. You want to ask yourself, what problem am I solving for those listeners? What problems do they have that I can help them solve? And thirdly, what should my listener feel, think, or do afterward? What do you want your listener to do? Even a 5-minute outline prevents hours of editing frustration, and it keeps your episodes on track. One of my early podcasts had me recording blindly, and I spent double the time editing. So, lesson learned, clarity first, and then speed second. Don't just rush through because you want to get 12 episodes recorded and batched and worked out for the entire month or for 6 months in advance or whatever. You want to think through your podcast episodes before you start recording. If you have clarity, it's going to make a lot more sense for the direction of your show. So if you can't batch record for the next 6 months, don't do that. If it means that you are going into your podcast blindly with just extra audios to just kind of feel better that they're on the back burner, you may actually regret that you recorded some of those episodes and may have to go back and re-record anyway, because maybe there's new content that's fresh and really deserving of the space and energy that you're in at that moment, because 6 months is a long time, right? And so although I do encourage batch recording, I encourage you to know kind of 6 months in advance some of the topics that you want to cover over the next half year or maybe over the next quarter or 2. I don't honestly suggest that you must record everything that far in advance, because you may have some in the moment ideas and things that you want to go into that show 4 months out that just are just not going to get captured because you're not in the essence of the moment 4 months prior, right? So if you record something now for the month of, like, this is January 2026. So if you record something now and then you don't release it until April or May, what you're saying today may still be relevant to 6 months from now, but maybe there are some things that you wish you'd added into that episode that you wish that you had inserted into the script of the show, because there are maybe some announcements or some things that are relevant to the times you're living in at the moment in April or May that are not relevant to when you recorded them in January. So I do recommend that you batch record a few, but not so far in advance. And I recommend that you do plan very far in advance. So plan for your 6 months or so. And that's just my recommendation. It's what I do, and everybody does it differently. So don't come for me if this doesn't work for you. You do what's best for you. Maybe for you, it's 3 months, 6 months is too far out. Maybe you can just plan for the quarter, and that's fine too. But I do totally believe in planning your podcast. So when you're planning, before you press record, make sure that you know those 3 things, and in preparation, who your podcast is for, what problem you're solving, and what should your listener feel, think, or do afterward. Another practical tip is to leverage what you already have, because you have community, hopefully. You have your email list, you have your clients, you have a small Facebook group maybe, or some type of social media platform where you have your core listeners. These are your first listeners. Sending an episode personally to one person who trusts you is far more effective than shouting into the void. So share with who is in your vicinity, who's in your circle of friends. And let's talk about growth, because growth doesn't come from going viral or obsessing over how many downloads you get. I do want you to be aware of how to see your downloads and how to take care of those and how to watch over those. But I don't think we should obsess over them. And I believe that when we really grow, it comes from that clarity that builds trust with our audience. When your podcast is crystal clear about who it's for, what it offers, listeners know what to expect and they just keep coming back. For example, when another one of my clients clarified that her show's purpose was from inspiration to help introverted entrepreneurs find their voice, she started seeing consistent downloads and audience engagement because she knew exactly who she was going for. I've had clients who have come to me with support about their faith-based podcast when they got really clear about their niche. whether it is they're reaching women of faith or moms of faith. That's really important to really specify who their target audience or niche market is. It becomes even more discoverable when they are clear. Their podcast will stand out because it makes sense who they're supporting, who they're reaching. So it wasn't fancy marketing. All it was a simple, precise messaging that made the difference. And you don't have to do this alone. Collaboration is a powerful tool. Borrow the room by connecting with other podcasters. You can do joint Instagram lives or swap shout outs. You expand your reach while you build relationships. So this is not about competition. You want to build relationships. I remember partnering with a small creator last year. She invited me to her show, her membership. She wanted me to speak on her membership, and I mentioned her in my show as well. And within a month, we both saw new listeners show up consistently. It wasn't about massive numbers. It was just meaningful reach, and it came from mutual support. Small numbers matter. If you have 10 listeners, imagine standing in a room with 10 people who chose to hear you. That's huge. Treat those early listeners like gold. Respond to messages, thank them personally, or even just shout them out. Those first listeners often become your most loyal advocates because, again, podcasting isn't a sprint. It's not a numbers game, even though we look at the numbers. It really is about building connection. And I'm going to talk about connection a lot on the show this year. So get ready, buckle your seatbelts, and get ready for this whole conversation about connection and consistency and trust over time. We will be talking about that quite a bit. And that's why I believe staying in the game is more powerful than just chasing the next download spike. So if you're ready for just a quick exercise to help you walk through everything I've been talking about, I want you to take a few minutes today to journal or record yourself answering those 3 questions we talked about earlier. Number 1, who is my ideal listener this year? Number 2, what problem am I solving for them in my next episode? And number 3, what's one way I can show up consistently this month without burnout? Even answering those 3 questions shifts your podcasting mindset from reactive to intentional. So here's what this year looks like at Soul Podcasting. Okay, I'm going to share what my 2026 plan is and what it actually means for you, my listener. So most weeks I will be releasing 2 episodes with 1 video in between, but some weeks there will be 1 episode, and the goal is just quality and intention, not pressure. My hope is that you take the same approach with your podcast, build a rhythm that works for you, and just be really intentional about your message. Trust that momentum that grows through clarity and persistence. Your consistency is going to look exactly the way your lifestyle allows it to. So as long as you're persistent, as long as you're clear, I think you'll be okay. So remember, you don't grow by pressing record harder, right? You know where that record button is. It's not about pressing record so much as it is about you growing by recording with purpose. Your podcast is a practice. Treat it like a practice, and it's going to serve you for years to come. So if today's episode made you realize that you want more clarity before you hit record again, I've got a free resource for you. It's my Launch Confidently podcasting checklist. It walks you through the foundational pieces that help you show up with intention instead of overwhelm. And you can grab that checklist and all of my free podcasting resources at soulpodcasting.com/resources. And if you love seeing content in action and behind the scenes, or longer teaching segments, you can come check out my YouTube channel. The link is in the show notes, and I'd love to see you over there. Well, my friend, thank you for listening, even with my stuffy nose and with my hoarse voice. Thank you for showing up today and listening to me all the way through this episode. Thank you for believing that your voice matters. And whether you're starting from 0 or you're scaling up or refining your podcast, remember that clarity, consistency, and intentionality beat volume every single time. So just keep showing up, my friend. Keep sharing your voice. And as always, keep podcasting with soul. Happy podcasting.